with the basic setup of all the quests finished, let's talk a little bit more about the modularity of this system and about other types of objectives. Because so far the only thing we have is we can pick up a quest over here, and then we get the objectives for the quest, so we do them one at a time, and that is fine, but we only have the one type of objective, which is walk into a trigger box, which is not that good. The whole point of setting up everything in a maybe slightly overconvoluted at first glance way is for it to be expandable. So let's go over a couple of examples of other types of quest objectives that we maybe could set up. Of course, you're free to make whatever kind of objective you want and add it into your quest system yourself. That's kind of the point. I just want to show you a couple of other things as inspiration and as a general guide. So let's go ahead, and in my quest system folder, I'm going to make a new actor, and let's call this something like world pickup, so that we can make something with that. And here we can fairly easily just add in, let's do a cube for troubleshooting purposes, and then a sphere overlap. Make that a little bit bigger so that it is easier to touch. And then on the event graph on begin overlap, we just check whether or not the thing overlapping with it is equal to the get player pawn. And if it is, we run an event dispatcher, something like picked up. So if you want to have a quest where you need to go specifically pick up a certain item out of the world, this is the way that we could do it. So we can just call that out if this is true. And now that we have this actor set up, we can just listen out for specifically this event dispatcher on specific instances as a quest point. So let's do that. Let's add one of these into the world right here. Let's actually add two of them to the world, shall we? And then go into our base objective and create a new child blueprint class, and let's call this item pickup objective. And let's open up the location objective for a reference on how we did things. We did on location reached. After we activate the objective, that's what we bind to. So let's do the same thing for our world pickup. So item pickup objective, we override the function activate objective, which we want to run the parent function on first, and then we want to create a variable for this one, and this is item pickup reference or something like that, which will be of type world pickup, the thing that we just made, the actor. And that's going to be, as always, instance editable and exposed on spawn, so that we can set it right away when we make the objective. And with that, we're going to on activate objective bind to picked up, at which point we just create an event, make a matching function for it, picked up. And here we can just pretty much say we finish the objective. And now in our quest here, let's open up our like little test quest that we have here. Let's add in a second set of objectives. So as I said, we can make separate objective collections. So this is going to be one objective collection for walking to a couple of different places. But then what we're going to do is, just for organizational purposes, I'm going to comment this location objectives. And we're going to make another objective collection. And this one is going to be, let's change the name for this one, explore. Your first quest is now going to consist of a make array between two different other objective collections. So let's hook this up to the return value instead and make one more objective collection real quick. And this one will be gather items. We need to update both of these objective IDs as well. So let's say pick up items, and let's name this one something like first quest. And this objective collection will also be added into here. So the final objective collection that is going to hold our entire quest, I'm going to set to unordered now. And this make array is going to have two pins. The first pin is just going to be our location events. So everything that's in here is still going to be working the exact same way as I did before. The only difference is now we have this second objective collection that we're also putting into this array. And to make that objective collection, we're going to make you pick up two items. So let's copy this over and let's change this to a item pickup objective, which of course does not have the ordered value and all that kind of stuff. So we just refresh the node real quick, and we need a item pickup reference. So we promote that again to a variable. This will be item 1. We'll call this objective ID item 1. Again, you probably want to name these something a little bit more unique, like appending the quest name to them first. And then we just copy that over, name this one item 2, make that a variable as well. I will call that item 2. Both of these are going to be, of course, instance editable because we want to set them in the editor. And we'll just hook everything up together like this. And then the sub-objectives for our collection that's going into the array here, we need to still make an array. And that's going to have the 2 item picking objectives inside of it. This one, I don't think I want to have as an ordered one, just to have a little bit of variety and to show you stuff. So let's put a comment around this one as well, which you can do by just selecting nodes and pressing the C key, if you didn't know. And let's say this is items to search or whatever. That's a bad name for a comment, but will probably be fine. And that all comes together in this objective collection that is then going to be the entirety of the quest. So now we are back with our test quest, and we can see we have an item 1 and an item 2. Which we can use to pick out these 2 items. So now, when we play the game and we pick up that quest, we have our active quest, your first quest, and when we open it up, we have Explore, which is entirely ordered, so it makes us go over there first, and then there, and then there. But we also have Gather Items, and that says Gather Items and Gather Items, because we just copied over the text between the 2 of them. But we can do these in any order we want. So we pick these up, and we can see, hey, this item has now been gathered, and going into it again doesn't actually like update anything because it's not looking for any like specific overlap twice. It's looking for specifically a signal from this one and then specifically a signal from this one in either order. So now we can see that that sub-objective collection has been finished off, but to finish off the entire quest, we still need to do the exploration part, which is all this, and then it finishes off the entire quest over here. So that is how we can set up a item pickup objective. Now, next up, let's do something where we can kill an enemy. And for that, we're going to have to set up a very basic, like, temporary enemy blueprint. So let's just make that. And this one we're going to give a sphere just to differentiate them a little bit. And in this one, when we get damaged, which is up here in the event somewhere, any damage, obviously in a proper enemy, you would have HP and you would check if the HP is less than 0 and then kill it. For now, just at the moment it receives any sort of damage or whatsoever, what we're going to do is an event dispatcher on death, and we're going to call that out and then maybe even destroy the actor if we wanted to. You also, if you wanted to, instead of making a separate event dispatcher for on death, you can also just bind to the on destroyed, because that is a thing that every actor has as well, on destroy. Bind event to on destroyed, there we go. If you want it to be a little bit more generic and not tied to something like an actor class, or maybe having to use an interface that calls anything like this, you can very much just bind to actor destroyed instead, and that does make it a little bit more generic. For now, I think I'm going to do this just for the ease of showing things off. Let's go into our third-person character here real quick. And I'm going to make a debug key. Let's do the F key. I like doing the F key. Where we sphere overlap actors. We set the filter to being the enemy. And the enemy, I assume, is going to have its collision world static. It is actually a world dynamic object, it seems like. So let's make this array. Funny thing is, if you don't make that array, it's going to scream at you because you do need to give in some object types. So let's set it to world dynamic. Get actor location for the sphere position here. This is just a very basic, like, test damage system, to be honest, within, like, let's do 500 or something like that. And now for all the out actors, we're gonna for each loop over them, and we just apply damage, which is a built-in system within Unreal. Doesn't really matter what type of base damage we deal to them, because we're not doing any math here. We just, whenever we receive any damage, we just call out the on that. And now we can go back into the base objective again. We can create a child blueprint class, enemy kill objective or something like that, where when we activate the objective, we search for a enemy reference, which is of course going to be a enemy object reference, as always, instance editable and expose on spawn. And then we bind to the onDeath event. And at this point, you kind of get the gist, I am sure. We create an event, we create a matching function, let's call that onKilled, which is just simply going to finish our objective. And let's do something a little bit funny here. Let's make that into a separate quest that unlocks when we finish this quest. I think that'll be a fun little change to throw into this too. So let's just copy over task quest for now. That makes task quest 1. Let's call this kill quest. And this is not going to have the location triggers and all that, of course, because it's going to be an entirely different quest. This will have a handful of enemy object references instead, because we have to kill specific enemies. And then here in init objectives, we can get rid of all of this. Let's keep one objective creation node around just because it's easier to be able to copy them over. And we can move all this back in a little bit to have everything closer together. Make array, of course, for the objective collection. And let's also just do 2 of these. So this will be enemy kill objective. Of course, for both of them, then we might want to refresh nodes because they have input pins that we don't need. And we just hook up the enemy reference 1 and 2, which are still called item 1 and 2 actually. So let's call this target 1 and target 2, just to make sure that things are a little bit more descriptive. And then we hook these up to right over here. And just like that, we have our second quest. So we can just drag in the kill quest, set up the targets that we want to kill. For that, we of course need to actually put in the targets into the world. That would help quite a lot. So let's put 1 over here and then 1 all the way over here or something. And let's try to pick those out again. I almost forgot though, do make sure that these quest IDs, again, for saving purposes mostly, but these quest IDs for the objectives need to be unique. So let's call them kill 1 and kill 2. And now we can do something a little bit funny, because if we go into the level blueprint for this level, we already have our test quest 1 reference here. I just highlighted our new quest, so I can make a reference to that as well. And what we can do is on begin play, using test quest 1, we can bind to quest completed, because that is a event dispatcher that we made. And if we then just make a custom event, we can then get the player character or player pawn or whatever. In either case, we use our get quest component interface for that. And with that quest component, we can add a quest. And the quest that we're going to add is going to be the kill quest. So now when we finish our first quest, our second quest will automatically be unlocked and started. Of course, that can potentially be an issue with specifically objects that can be destroyed. We'll talk about that in a moment. Actually, let's just do it right now. If I press this, one of the objects that we're going to be looking for will have been deleted already. And that might be a problem. So the best way to do that is to just only either like make these active or just spawn them in at quest activation instead. So we can go into our enemy blueprint, for instance, and on begin play, we can set actor collision to not being enabled anymore. And then also set visibility or set actor hidden in game. That's even better to being true. And then in the enemy quest objective, when we activate the objective, we also want to just go into our enemy reference and set both of these things to the opposite value. So they're no longer hidden and they now do have a collision. So they automatically get activated when they get relevant to the specific quest. Which you'll see, they don't show up now. I can actually just walk through where they exist, and only when that quest starts up will these become visible to us. So let's finish our first quests here, which of course is gathering these items, which is one of our sub-objectives, and then we can do the explorer bit of the quest, which allows us to get a new quest, which has bad text because I didn't set the text properly. But you can see now the actors that are supposed to represent our enemies have spawned in, so I can kill them and progress with this quest, which will then be added to our finished quests as well. I apparently made this a horizontal box and not a vertical box. That's my bad. It should be a vertical box. I want to do one last example just to show things off a little bit, and that is going to be making something that doesn't necessarily require you to bind to very specific things. Because right now, we can bind to these locations, or these specific actors, or these specific actors, and wait for a certain action to be performed on those specific actors, which is very powerful and very good, but still, you might want a quest where you check, hey, have you gotten a certain amount of items, for instance, right? And that becomes a little bit more complex quite quickly, and in order to properly show that off, I would need to import an inventory system into this project, which I don't really feel like doing. So we're not going to get very complex, but I'm going to do a very quick like mock-up inventory system real quick to show you something that might work kind of like how you would set that up. So really, really quickly, I'm going to speed through this. If you do want an actual inventory component and an entire system, I have an entire like 2 playlists for that as well. So don't you worry about that. For now, we'll call this invcomp. The inventory component will have an item added. I will make a primary data asset for the item class. Then we'll make a data asset based on the item class. So that'll be item 1. And we'll copy it over for item 2. Actually, we need to duplicate it, item 2. So we have 2 different items now. I'll make a structure for the inventory slots, which is going to have the amount, which is of course going to be an integer, as well as the item, which is going to be an item class object reference. Item class is a bad name for it. But again, I'm kind of speeding through this. The inventory component will have an array of items. So let's make that the inventory slot structure as an array. We'll make an add item function, and that will also call out the on item added. This is the kind of funny thing though, is if we go back to on item added, we do want to broadcast which item and which amount of item. So we just want to create an input here for the added item, which is just going to be the structure that we made. So we can pass that right through. And now whenever we add an item, it's going to add the item and broadcast to any listeners, which could be quest objective objects, what item was just added. So now we don't need to bind to the specific items that we want to pick up. We can set something up where we can specifically say what item we want to be looking out for. So let's create that. Going back into our quest, base objective, create blueprint class, item, gathering, objective. And this is going to be a little bit more involved. There's going to be a little bit more code added now than just binding to one thing, because we need to write a little bit of logic on top of it. And this is really starting to show how powerful an expandable system like this can be. So when we activate objective, what we're going to do, the very first thing is we need a reference to the player's inventory component now. So we're still going to be binding to an object in much the same way. So let's bind to the inventory component, and that'll be the specific inventory component that we're going to be watching. So this will theoretically even scale with multiplayer games, because you're going to specifically be looking at one specific inventory for every instance of this quest being started. Anyway, we make a variable of inventory component, which of course is going to be exposed on spawn and all that kind of stuff. There we bind to on item added, where we create a event. We make a matching function, which has the added item. And here we can start doing some fun stuff. So we can break this slot, and first and foremost, we can check whether or not the item asset that we just got is equal to, let's promote this to a variable, the item to look for, or something like that. So now we only will progress if the item that we picked up is actually the item that this quest objective is telling you to get, which of course is going to be instance editable, expose and spawn. Everything essentially you add in these objectives, you need to make instance editable and expose and spawn. So let's make another variable as well, which will be the amount of items that we want to get. So the amount to get will be a integer, which will be instance editable and expose to spawn. And we're actually going to get another integer right here. And this is the amount gathered. And this one doesn't need to be set to any sort of expose and spawn or whatever. This is just what we're going to be incrementing to keep track of how far along we are. So if the item we're looking for is the same one that we just picked up, we set our amount gathered to being our current amount gathered plus the amount that we just picked up. And then at the very end here, after we figure out how many we have gathered, we can check if this is equal to or greater than or equal to, it is actually the amount that we need to get. And if it is, we can finish objective. But if it is not, we still need to update our objective because it now has a new amount of completion progression. So we still need to call update objective with the objective just being itself. Now, since we are making something that requires some more in-depth calculations, because now we have potentially like picking up 15 items or 20 items, we also want to go into our get completion progress and overwrite that as well. Because now what we want to do, if you want to get the amount we have gathered and divide it by the amount to get. Quite relevant though, is that we want to make these into floats before we divide them. Because if you divide an integer by an integer, it can only result in an integer, which means that you don't get a decimal place. So we want to get a 2 float for both of these first. And then the amount gathered, we're going to divide by the amount to get. And this is going to update every single time as well for things like a progress bar. So let's go back into our killing quest and set up a second set of objectives here as well, just because it's the first quest that I had like right at me, to be honest with you. Let's call this your second quest. Objective ID I'm going to set to quest 2 and so on and so forth. We have to kill these things. This doesn't need to be ordered. Let's construct a objective collection for the killing things. Objective name, kill them all. Kill quest for the objective ID, that sort of thing. Let's make these ordered just because, why not? I like showing the flexibility of the system, that is why. Hook these up to there. This is going to go into the objective for like the final output. And then we're going to make one more objective for the final output, and that will be our item gathering objective, which of course, let's refresh nodes to get rid of that like weird little input. That's going to require us to get an inventory component. But since we're just in a kill quest actor here, which is an actor, we can very easily just get player character. And ideally you would have a interface set up to get the player character's inventory component, all that kind of stuff. For the time being, I'm just going to cast to our third person character blueprint to get the inventory component we haven't even added yet. Hold on. Let's add an inventory component. Invcomp, there we go. Now we can get that inventory component. Make sure that you compile the player blueprint before trying to get this, otherwise it might not show up. And then we can just choose the item to look for in this list here. Item to look for does seem to be a normal object reference. So let's actually go back into here and make sure that this is set to our item class object reference, because now it'll just show up with drop-down menus for our items. So I want to gather, let's say 15 of item 1, get grass or something like that. And then for item 2, I want to gather just 5, get rocks, I don't know, something like that. Grass for the objective ID and then rocks for this objective ID. And of course, as usual, we make that into an objective collection with make array. Set both of these up like that. We want to make sure that these are not set to be ordered either, because I want to be able to gather these items in any order that I want. And then our objective collection is going to go into this array to make this other objective collection. And now we have our like nested quest set up all good again. I make sure that the inventory component is hooked up to both of the objectives though. And for these, I think it makes sense to show progress bars as well. So let's make a quick little actor for item pickup as well. So this can be item pickup. And this one I will also make a sphere, but I'll make this significantly smaller, something like 0.2. And then we will give this a sphere collision. And then on begin overlap, we just check whether or not the thing that we're overlapping with is equal to the get player character. In this case, actually, since we need to do a cast anyway, we might as well just do it with the casting method. So cast to third person character, because we need to get the inventory components, because we're going to be using the item function on it. And the new item that we're going to be adding will be a variable here, item on a per instance basis. And then the amount to add, for now we'll just set it to 1, but you can also make that a variable if you really wanted to. And let's say we place this down here. We say that this is item 1, and we just like place a bunch of these things around. So this is like 6, 9, it will be like 12, and this will be 15. Is that right? I think that's about right. And then let's add 5 more over in this direction over here, and these will all be item 2. So I think that should have updated them all at the same time. Yeah. So we don't need to link these specific item instances or anything to our quest, because the quest is just going to check whenever we update our item inventory at all, whether or not it should update itself based on what we just picked up. That said, the way we set this up now doesn't take into account any of the items that we might already have inside of our inventory when we start this quest. If you want to do that, you need to have your inventory system a little bit more built out with like proper inventory querying set up to work. This is a fairly simplified version. Again, if you want a good inventory system, I have 2 full playlists going over the basics and then some more intermediate stuff right here on this channel for free, so you can watch those. And now we can do the same boring quest that we've done about 1,000,000 times at this point, walking around the map, picking up all our stuff around here, and then unlocking the second quest, which has the killing objective, which now is enabled, of course. It seems like it maybe didn't enable the second one this time around. That's worth looking into. But more importantly is the getting grass and getting rocks. So all these things are grass. I actually just realized I didn't set them up to destroy themselves when we picked them up, so they're not going to disappear. But they will, every time I collide with them, increase the amount of progress that we made in this quest. And when we get to picking them all up, or as many as we need anyway, we have finished up that objective. And that is for those items. These are the rocks, of course, which we only need 5 of to complete this objective. And now our quest item gathering has been fixed up. So that is a slightly more in-depth kind of objective where you can start seeing how this quest system can very much hook into other systems that you have, as long as those systems broadcast their events through event dispatchers. You can easily hook into them. So that's been a fun little overview, a slight detour, just widening the scope of what we can do with this quest system a little bit. And the interesting bit is that these will, in theory, still keep counting up even after you have completed the quest. So if you make a quest that says, hey, gather 15 of these items, and then it unlocks the next objective, like go back to the person that gave you the quest. When you get back to the person giving you the quest, you can then check the objective for gathering the items on how many actually ended up being gathered. And if it is over a certain like secret higher number, maybe that can include better quest rewards. And I think that's actually a fun idea to explore in a future video. It's setting up quest rewards and maybe doing a kind of like a grading system. Having a base set of rewards, but then if we have reached a certain amount above the task that we have been assigned, we get a different reward or maybe a better reward or whatever. So let's take a look at that the next time around. And for the full course, if you're watching this in the future, it should be all up on the YouTube channel already. But if you're watching this shortly after it was uploaded, there will be a link down below in the description to the Patreon where you can find the full course. And a very big thank you to all of my Patreons. You can see them on screen right now. If you want to help out supporting the channel, there's a link down below in the description to the Patreon page. A huge thank you to my Cave Digger tier supporters, Sir J. Thomas,